Hello, I'm Alan, welcome to the Guitar Shack. Today I'm going to talk to you about this Epiphone ES335 inspired by Gibson Figured. And this is one which I bought new, in fact I pre-ordered when they first came out in 2021. I think I waited sort of 4 or 5 months for it to be delivered. So these were the relaunch of and the upgrade of the Dot series. So much closer to a Gibson ES335. So a lot of upgrades to it. It had the block inlays on the neck and a bound neck, which is a nice touch. Makes it more like a mid-60s ES335. It comes with Epiphone's Alnico Classic humbuckers, which are slightly hot, slightly modern compared to the other ones, the Pro buckers that they put in Sheratons. They're nice pickups, and it's got proper CTS wiring. So a lot of upgrades to this. It came with the changed headstock, which was one of the things that people didn't like about the earlier Dots. And it comes with some vintage Clusins. So it's a really nice guitar. And as I say, I was looking forward to it when they first announced it in 2020 and pre-ordered it, and I've been delighted with it ever since. So it didn't take much setting up at the time, but it needed the things that new guitars generally do. So the action needed lower, needed new strings, it needed the frets polished, and the nut was slightly too high, so I adjusted the nut. I don't recall doing any actual fretwork to it. The fret ends were really nice. I think it was all level, but it did need polishing. And then just setting the intonation. So just a standard kind of start. And I've had it for 3 years now. It's a really nice guitar. So today's video is really just taking you through the process that I put all my guitars through when I put them up for sale, which is to strip it down, deep clean it, clean out or do some cleaning on the electronics, restring it, and then just, in this case, just check the setup, because I know it's perfectly set up because I've done it myself. So the obvious question is, why am I selling it now? And the answer is, I'm not entirely sure that I am, but I'm going to prepare it for sale and then make a decision, because it, you know, just as a part of general annual maintenance, I always give it a deep clean, that, you know, what I call a silver service for my customers. So it's a deep clean, set up, and change the strings. So that's what I'm going to do. But I might put it up for sale, and the reason I might put it up for sale is that I also have this other one. So this one is the Blueberry Burst colour that it's called. Also came out at the same time. I think this is a 2020, also a 21 model. This one is effectively new. So I bought this as liquidated stock from a music shop which was closing. So it is, to all intents and purposes, a brand new guitar. It hasn't been sold to a customer. It hasn't been set up. It's still got all the factory plastics on it. So when I was deciding which one to go for online, I preferred the colour scheme of this one. And I didn't expect to like this one as much as I do, but in practice I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's that bit different. So I am thinking that I might just keep this one. So I'm going to do the same process on this, and then I will decide which one I put up for sale. The other reason I wanted to do the two of them together is that I think it's going to be a really interesting comparison in terms of why you need to do a setup, or get somebody like me to do a setup on a brand new guitar, because it is a question that I get asked, which is, I've just gone out and spent 500 quid on a nice high spec Epiphone. It gets really good reviews, it sounds lovely, it's in really nice condition, you know, why do I need to bring it to somebody like you to do a setup? And there's a few reasons for it, but the main one for me is that if you spent that much money on a guitar, you actually want to get it playing and feeling and sounding as good as it possibly can. And of course, they don't out of the box. And that's partly to do with the way that we buy guitars nowadays. So, you know, when I was but a lad, I used to buy guitars, them second hand mostly, but if you ever bought them new, you bought them from a bricks and mortar shop, and you take it as an absolute expectation that it would go through their workshop and receive a full setup before you picked it up. Now, of course, most people buy them online. I bought that one online. I bought this one online. And so what this is as it left the factory. And that left that factory 3 years ago, and it left the factory in China. And I don't know where it's been ever since. But I do know that these are at least 3 years old strings. And I also know that, you know, most people would say that the strings that come on most guitars out of the factory are cheap, and, you know, they don't sound as percussive and as bright. They sound like other strings sound like when they're 6 months old and they're really worn out. So it's not doing the guitars any favours, just even to keep the standard strings on it. So that the first thing I do with any new guitar is to put new strings on it. The second reason is that although it is set up and it does play well, the reality is this is a high volume product produced in a factory in an industrial process, and it'll go through some basic quality control to make sure that it's all in spec as it should be, but it's not going to get the adjustment and the finessing and the attention to detail which you would expect to get if you paid more for, you know, £1,000 or upwards range guitar. Just the economics don't allow it. So it does have opportunities to be improved, and generally it's the fretwork. Now this one I can feel just a little bit on the fret ends. They're not bad by any manner of means, and I think they're entirely fine for what is basically a £600 guitar new. But they can be improved, and I will improve them, so I'll do some work just on the fret ends. I'll check the levels, because sometimes you get a high fret, and one of the ways that factories get around that is to say, okay, I'll set the action at a level which allows for slight unevenness in the frets, which is perfectly fine, and for most players it doesn't even matter, because, you know, you never really have a problem with it. However, this action is high. It's considerably higher than the action that I could achieve with that one, and that will be what to expect to be able to achieve with this one when I do some work on it. So there's that, and then there's just the intonation. I've yet to find a factory guitar where the intonation is set. So all of those things are a reason to do a setup. And then there's just the general construction point, which is an electric guitar is a combination of wood and metal and electrics. And this was made in China. This has been in a warehouse somewhere in Southeast Asia. It's been on a sea container crossing half the world to get here. Sat in a distribution warehouse somewhere. Sat in a shop somewhere. And eventually it's ended up in my hands. So that's an awful lot of climatic changes for this wooden product to have gone through. And of course, one of the reasons why guitars are fully adjustable, and you do have the ability to set the action in the truss rod particularly, is to take account of the fact that when it adjusts to a different environment, it is going to need to be set up slightly differently. So almost by default, any brand new guitar, unless it's been set up for you immediately before delivery to you, somewhere local to you, it is just going to need a setup, and it will benefit massively from it. And a lot of people don't realise that. I mean, I buy a lot of guitars, and the most common thing that I find, which is a dead giveaway, is that the nut's never been touched, and that the intonation's never been set. The amount of Telecasters I buy where the intonation is in a straight line, never been set. So there's an untapped potential in all those instruments, and that's why you should bring it to me, because I can take that guitar that you just bought and I can make it the guitar that you hoped it would be, and that's really what I do. So that's my sales pitch for why you should bring it to me. Now I will do that to your guitar, and so will any guitar tech, and so can you, by learning the skills to do it, which are teachable, and they are worth acquiring, because if you can do your own setups, then you can always keep your guitar in the best possible condition. So that's the pitch for why you should do this to a new guitar. Yes, you spent 500 quid on it. Yes, I'm going to ask you for an extra 50 quid. That 10% difference is a huge part of the difference between a £500 guitar and an £800 guitar or a £1,000 guitar. Yes, your £1,000 guitar will have slightly nicer pickups, it will slightly nicer electronics. The reality is that it's probably very similar in terms of all the other material aspects, but there's more labour spent on it. Okay, so that's the why. So what I'm going to do with today's video is I have already set this up, and there's a separate video where I've deep cleaned it and got it ready for sale. The setup as it has been for a couple of years when I first got it, and I've played it in and I've adjusted it over the years. So that is set up perfectly. The action's really low, the pickups are really clear, the nuts being set so it's really comfortable, it doesn't pull sharp in the high fret, on the low frets. And it's just a really nice example and plays like a really nice example. So my objective with this one is to get it to the same condition as that. So I have the opportunity to do a back-to-back test, and that's really what this video is going to be about. So I'm going to measure all the critical measurements on this as a ex-factory condition, and then I'm going to compare those measurements to what I've got this one set up at, and that will demonstrate what I'm actually achieving as a result of doing the setup. So here is the Raspberry T Burst one in close-up. So the first thing you see is it's got the revised Epiphone headstock, which has got the more Gibson-like open book top to it and is a smaller size compared to the Epiphone Dot, which preceded it, and looks all the better for it. And it's got these vintage closing style as opposed to the Grovers that came as standard on the Dots. It's also got a synthetic bone nut, which in this case has been fettled. And the fretwork when it arrived, I think the reviews say some of them are good, some of them are bad. Mine was good. There wasn't anything wrong with it, but it did need a polish. So I think I did a couple of rough fret ends, and I did a decent polish on it, but I don't recall doing any actual fretwork on it. As you can see, it's got a very nice flamed top. So this was, I think there was a standard model and then there was the flamed top model. So the standard model has got the dot inlays and solid colours, and then you've got the flamed one which has got the block inlays. So it's a really pretty guitar, and it's done me well. I like it a lot. I play it a lot. Oh, the other thing which was new for these models was it was a more 335 style pick guard as opposed to the Epiphone shaped one with the Epiphone logo on it, which was on the Dot. So this is the before condition. So this is a really pretty guitar, and like all my guitars, you've probably realised from my video, I do tend to look after them, and I do tend to be quite fastidious about the condition. And this one has been well looked after. It gets restrung every 6 months or so. It gets a deep clean and a waxing probably at least once a year, wiped down every time it gets played. And this is, you know, a good, nice to play, nice looking consumer guitar. But of course, once you get up close, even somebody like me, you know, this is the condition. You can see that actually, get up close, there's a fair amount of dust on it. There's some greasy marks. It's had thumbprints all over it. It's, you know, the strings themselves obviously get heavily played. And it could benefit from a proper clean. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. Because when I sell this, I am going to be asking for quite a lot of money for it. Not by guitar standards, but by any other standards. You're buying something for a number of hundreds of pounds. And in what other circumstances would people think it was acceptable to just shove it in a box or hand it to you at the doorway and say, there you go, get on with it, without actually cleaning stuff? But the amount of guitars that I see advertised, which are basically advertised because they've been sitting in a corner unplayed, and people are just, right, I'm just going to get rid of it. They don't put any effort into it. They don't really know what they're selling half the time. And it's not a great experience. And buying guitars online is a bit of a lottery for that reason. You don't really know what you're getting. You can see a bit from the pictures and how much care's been taken. So my philosophy is, I want to make the buying experience as good as it can be. And I want to make it that you get a guitar that's in the best possible condition and set up ready to play. and it really is the guitar that you were expecting it to be, you were hoping for when you bought it. And that's why I do this. So this is going to be destrung, deep cleaned, restrung, check the action, check all the setup, and then it's going to be listed for sale. Welcome back. So this is actually about a week or so later. I've been madly busy doing stuff with Fenders and Telecasters and a couple of quite interesting tellies that I've acquired and a couple of interesting Strats that I've acquired as well, which I'll be covering on the channel soon. But in the meantime, I should point out that although it's a week later, I am wearing the same shirt, but it has actually been washed in the meantime. So I'm not quite that much of a dirty urchin. So we've got the two 335s, and I think up close, I mean, they are the same guitar, just different paint jobs. Now this one, I was looking at the early cut of this video, and it really stands out on video that this bit is red, and it also, that really stands out in pictures as well, and that's why I didn't actually buy this one in the first place. But when I've seen it in reality, it doesn't look red. It's just got a slightly red tinge to what would otherwise be, you know, a fade into almost black. So overall, it just adds a kind of slight warmth to a blue guitar, and it's a much nicer finish in reality than it sometimes looks a bit on the internet or in pictures, where it can be a bit Marmite. So the comparison, obviously, with the T-burst one is the shape of the bursting. So on this one, this is a non-traditional. I mean, on a standard 335 and a Gibson 335, it's got this kind of burst. It's got a sort of teardrop shape here, and then the Mickey Mouse ears are dark, same as the bursting colour. Whereas here, this is, I think, more like you would see in a casino. I've certainly seen Paul Weller's got a casino, which has got that kind of bursting to it, and it just takes the light colour into the ears a little bit. So I like that, although it's not a kind of clear copy of what every other 335 in the universe looks like. So it really is just down to aesthetic differences between these two. And obviously the fact that this one's new, so it's still got the plastic on the pickups, still got the plastic on here, still got the original factory strings, and it's never been set up. So that's what we're here to talk about. So if we start off and just say, okay, I'm going to check the action height, I'm going to check the relief, I'm going to measure the nut height, and then I'm going to take all the settings from this one, and I'm going to aim for those when I set this one up. I am going to also deep clean this one so it's ready to go and be listed. I'm going to deep clean this one as well. Not that it's going to need much, having never really been played much, but it's certainly going to need a good dusting, a good clean and waxing. So I'll do all that. And I think the fret ends on this one are could just do with a bit of dressing. So whereas they're nice and smooth on this one. So I'll be doing that as well. And then we'll take it from there. And then I think what I'll end up doing is I'll probably list both of them, and I'll end up keeping whichever one is not sold as quickly. Or I might sell them both, because I'm getting through so many guitars at the moment that, you know, a change is as good as the rest. So we'll get into some close-ups of doing that. Before we do that, I just wanted to have a little bit of, you know, what else have I got in the workshop from a Epiphone point of view. So the black one is my 2020 Sheraton Pro. So that's the updated model, which has got the Epiphone Pro buckers, which is, you know, their version of the Gibson burst buckers. And that one, I've added a genuine Bigsby to it. It's might get a wiring upgrade at some point. The wiring's not as, I think these are CTS. I don't know, I've never been into that one to check what the wiring is. At some point they will start to get noisy, and at some point I'll rip them out. But before I do that, one of the reasons is that I've got this one, which is a 2014, I think, Dot, which is a nice guitar, but it's got the original Alnico Classic, I think they're called, Epiphone humbuckers. These aren't as popular and a lot of people rip them out. I don't have a problem with them, I quite like them. I think they're nice and warm. You get a good growl out of them, and my first semi-acoustic was identical to this, and I had that for, I think I bought it in about 2005, something like that, and I had it for about 5 or 6 years, and then it was one of the guitars that I eventually did a deal and traded it in for a Gibson ES339, and I thought I would do the trading in mid-price gear for higher end gear, and then a couple of years later I traded back out of it, partly because I didn't think the differential in quality of the guitar or how nice it was really worth the difference in the money. And by taking the money back out from that Gibson, I then ended up buying an Epiphone 339, which was pretty much identical to the Gibson but a different finish. You know, 95% is nice for 20% of the price. I bought an Epiphone Les Paul second hand. I bought a used Fender Strat Mexican, which is the one that I have just was on the channel a week or so ago and which has now been sold. And I bought a brand new Player Series Butterscotch Telecaster. Now, when I traded my Dot in against the Gibson, I also traded in a US Tele that I had at the time. And again, that Player Series was a bit of a revelation because I realised that again, it wasn't as nice as the American one that I had sold, but it was close enough for my purposes and a lot cheaper. So it was one of the classics of one guitar pays for 4 guitars type scenario, and that's kind of where I've stuck with since then. Having said that, a couple of the guitars that I've got in this week, I've got a Telecaster Elite USA, which is a very nice guitar, which I'm going to be putting through my usual preparation process and then selling on. And I've also got a USA Deluxe Stratocaster, which I picked up, which again is a very nice guitar. But again, you know, I think it's horses for courses. You do get a bit extra with USA models for sure, but it depends where you want to sort of set your level at, really. So my plans for this one are, this is really one for me to keep mess about with, practice on. So I'm going to spend some time and some money on this for a number of reasons. One is because I just like Dots, I like the way they feel, and they're nice guitars and I like the red ones. Secondly, because I've never actually done a rewire of a 335, and I think that's sort of a rite of passage. If you're going to call yourself a guitar tech, you've got to be, you've got to have a few of those under your belt. And you know, I think I want to make sure that I do one on my own guitar first before I inflict my lack of knowledge on any customer guitars. And I think the Dot is a real nice basis for upgrading. So I've got a set of Epiphone Pro Buckers, same as in the Sheraton, which are going to go in there. I've got a nice wiring kit with proper CTS pots, orange drops, switchcraft jack and switch, and braided wiring to do the sort of full Gibson style wiring, do a 50s job in there. And then I've just imported from the States a GFS X-Trem system. I can't remember the name of it, but basically it fits on the posts of where the stop bar would be. It places the stop bar. It's completely reversible. It doesn't require any drilling, unlike the Bigsby, but it gives you a trem, and then I've got a roller bridge which I'll put in with it. So mainly to try that out, see if that works as a system. I've tried the Bigsby, it works perfectly. I've tried the Bigsby Chinese one, it was absolute rubbish, don't go near them. I might keep that on this, I might do something else with it, but I just wanted to try it out. So this is a bit of a experimental mule, and then we'll see how we get on. But I like these, so that's one to watch out for in the future. So a couple of things before we get into the actual measurement. I mean, you can literally see how high the action is on this one set X factory compared to this one, which is lowered and is set to, you know, a proper level. So that's, I mean, that's not the end of the world because it's easy enough to adjust the Tune-o-matic bridge, But that just shows the difference in the setup. And of course, if you don't know how to do that, then you're always going to be playing with that higher action on these. The other thing is that is a properly intonated tunematic bridge for this guitar. This has got two perfectly straight lines running in a straight line up the middle and clearly has never been intonated, and therefore the whole guitar will be playing out of tune. And again, that's the reason to do the setup. And then you won't be able to see it, but the action on the nut is higher here, that needs work. And then just on the frets themselves, you probably can't see it, but I mean, they're not bad, but they definitely need a polish. And again, that's something which, it's not really a setup issue, but it is part of the, when you get a new guitar, you're going to want to do a little bit of extra preparation work on it, one of which is change the strings and to polish up the frets. And then as you can see on this one, we've still got the plastic covers on the pickups, and the what looks like a really raggedy pick guard is actually just the plastic covering on it. So let's get the rulers out and the micrometers out and let's see where we are. So just starting off with the action at the 12th. So on this one, I've got it set at pretty low. It's about 1.2 mil, which is very low on the treble side, and it is, I'd say, about 1.6, 1.7 on the bass side. So yeah, I mean that's a low playing guitar, but it can take it. It's a nice neck and it works well. Whereas on this one, straight out of the factory, we are looking at, on the treble side, we are looking at nearly 3 mil on the high, and about 3.5 mil on the bass side. So clearly there's about double the action height on this one ex factory, which is something that we need to adjust. So that's 0.15 mil or 0.006 of an inch. Whereas on the blue one, it's visibly at least double that. So this is 0.1, and that fits. It actually fits about perfectly. Yeah, so that is about a quarter of a mil, so 0.25 mil, which is 0.01 of an inch. So again, yeah, it's no big deal. That's basically just tweaking the truss rod a little bit, but that shows the difference in the setup. And of course, that kind of difference just makes this feel a lot less smooth and silky to play. So I mean, those are the two critical measurements really from a setup point of view in terms of the feel of the guitar. Obviously this intonation, the comedy straight line, is it actually a straight line? Yeah, look at that. Perfect straight line. I mean, it's very artistic. It's not actually what intonation settings are there for. So that's going to have to be done. Yeah, so the nut on this one is a fair amount of movement above. I'm not even going to bother measuring it. I'll do that once I've restrung it. But I mean, it's a good bit higher than that one, and that means that it just plays less nicely. And that's the thing about the setup. It affects how nicely your guitar plays. Not make that much of a difference to the sound. The pickup heights don't look visually very different. This one's a little bit lower than that one. And that will affect the balance of the tone, but you know, realistically it's all about the feel. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to de-string this, I'm going to give it a thorough clean, and then I'm going to string it up, and then I'm going to set it up, and I'm going to get it to the same settings as that one, or as close as it will get, and then we'll take it from there. Goodbye, cheap strings from China. You never fulfilled your life's purpose. I am very sorry. So I'm not entirely sure what the history of this one is. It's according to the serial number, it is a July 21. So it's been knocking around sort of 2.5 years since it was originally built. And as I said, I acquired it from the liquidation of a music shop, which I think the owner of that had unfortunately passed away. So it's obviously been in stock, and it had a sort of hanging tag with the price on it. So it'd been in that stock for however long. There's I'll be going over it with cleaning and wax, but one thing I have noticed with it is there is an imperfection just here, and I don't know whether it's a bash, but there's an indentation. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a slight indentation there, just inside the lower bout, or the lower cutaway, which doesn't affect it at all. It's just cosmetic. But you know, even if this was being sold as brand new, that makes it B stock, which might be another reason why it's been sitting around unsold for a while. I mean, that doesn't bother me in the slightest, as a guitar that I'll be probably keeping. But obviously it would affect the value on the used market. So fair enough. So let's get those off. Okay, so it's pretty clean. I mean, normally when you take the pick guard off, you've got a lot of dust in there, but it's not much dust there than the rest of the guitar. So that's good. I mean, it's not going to need a huge amount of cleaning, but I'll just go in and just out of interest, really have a look at the pickups, see what they look like. So I've got Epiphone AC, PN, HBB, C. Which I believe is known as the Alnico Classic Pro, which I will confirm. Oh, you can see I can see the block that goes all the way through, and gives it the solid block down the middle of it, which is the kind of standard 335 construction. I'll just whip the other one off, partly for completeness, partly just to give it a clean and wax under there. Okay, so the wires on this one are a little bit tighter. Oh, we've got a barcode. So it says EIES. So I don't got the EI, but it's obviously ES335BB, which is Blueberry Burst. And ACPN HBNC. So the only difference here is that's HBN for neck. And I've got a sticker which is stuck on and then has been sprayed over, so it's perfectly crisp and firm as it's in its slightly peeled off state, which is quite fun. Okay, so I'll get in there and give those a clean, and then decide what I'm doing with the neck. Because if I do need to do any neck work, I want to pull the pickup out of the way. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quite gentle little rocks on this, which is a decent result for a brand new guitar. I've seen a lot worse than that on other guitars of a similar or higher value, and you know, they don't get a full leveling after they get fretted, so it's always going to be the case that you've got a few rocks. unless you're going to go to the trouble of doing a fret job on it. And I guess the question for me is, with that number, will I spend more time spot leveling them? Because if I'm keeping this, I want it perfect. Or do I just give the whole thing a very gentle kiss with the leveling stone? And I think that's what I'm going to do. So first things first is we need to get the neck perfectly straight, and my notch straight edge tells me that I don't think it is. No, it's not. It's slightly we're slightly bowed backwards at the moment. So let's just adjust the truss rod a little bit. Just to bring it completely straight. Just give that a minute to settle, then I'll give it another wee turn. Now I do realise that this thing says Fender on it, however it does say Gibson on this side because it is dual edged, so I am not using the wrong tool for it. And that is now perfectly straight. The significance of that, as I've probably bored you with many times, is if your neck is completely straight, then when you level the frets, then you're keeping them at a consistent height. If there's any bow or any forward or back bow on the neck, then what you will end up doing, your frets won't be following a parallel line to the neck, and you'll end up with some either lower frets at the end if it's slightly bowed forward, or lower frets in the middle if it's bowed backward, which isn't the end of the world, but it does mean that you've lost half your frets before you start. Okay, so we've got it all taped up, just marking the bits I need to concentrate on. And then what I do then is just mark the tops of the frets so I can see how much material has been taken off. So literally, I'm just going to give it a few passes lightly with the fine side, the finer grit, just to try and get us down to a level. And that is done. So just a light little kiss on every fret, down to a little sliver of silver, just to know that we're touching the tops. And no more. Less is definitely more on fretwork. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just for the ones where it's come down more, I'm just going to crown them over a little bit. You don't all need it, but there's just a few. So basically the ones that are marked are the ones where it was already took a bit more off. And that one was quite meaty. And all we're doing is just gently rounding over the sides a little bit, just to restore the fineness of the top. Doesn't take much. So next up, I'm just going to use a bit of lemon oil on the fingerboard. More for conditioning rather than cleaning at this stage, because I haven't seen enough action to need cleaning really. Right, so that's back together, and I have made the decision that I am going to keep this one. So, rather than rebuilding it as putting it back together as standard, I'm going to put a little trem on it. So that's this little beastie here, which should mount straight on here. So let's see, shall we? So this comes with, so it's a GFS X-Trem, and it's kind of an updated Bigsby type principle, but it's got strings that go straight through the back instead of bending them round and falling off and all the other hassle that you get with Bigsby's. And it's got string rollers, so that's going to go under those rollers up over the bridge, and those roll quite freely, so hopefully those are going to work well. We shall find out. So they're quite elongated holes, which should then mean you can get your string, or you can get, they'll match up with the studs, like so. Seems pretty solid. Apart from the spring, which goes in like that. Same principle as a Bigsby. Okay, that seems okay. And then the next bit I need is this roller bridge, which I'm hoping will drop straight onto the standard Epiphone studs. So there we have it. Trem installed. I've tuned it up a couple of times, and as with all these things, you need to get it balanced so it's under enough tension, but it seems to be stable enough for me to continue the setup now. But I think it looks good. Just sort of balances out the other chrome work nicely, and it looks really good with the blue. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. We'll see how it is in action, of course. I mean, ultimately the test of any trem system is whether or not it stays stable when you're using it in anger. But it's certainly, from a technical point of view, it's a much nicer, more elegant solution than some of the others. So you're going straight in at the back here with your balls up against there, so there's no messing about coming under and hooking it on like you do with the Bigsby. You're then going under these independent rollers, so they're all rolling independently, which must be better for tuning stability. You've then got it going over this bridge, which feels solid. Now that's nothing to do with that trem, that's a generic roller bridge that I bought from a UK supplier, whereas I imported this from GFS. But we'll see how it goes, but yeah, pleased with that, it looks good. Okay, so this one's now done. So that's a full new guitar setup. So just to recap, what I've done with this is I have recut the nut, I have set the action at the 12th fret to just under 2mm on the bass side and about 1.6 on the treble side, which is a nice, comfortable but reasonably fast action. I've set the neck relief, I have got the nut height at a nice playable level, and then I've set the intonation, and in this case I've fitted this trem. So that's, apart from fitting the trem, that's kind of what I would do with this guitar, but new off the internet. And you know, that's, I think, demonstrates the level of work that you can improve any new guitar with a setup like this. This is now plays beautifully, whereas it wasn't unplayable, but it wasn't brilliant beforehand, and this is now lowered fast, and it's like I keep saying, this is the guitar as you would want it to be. And this is what that little bit of extra time spent on it and that investment with a guitar tech, even on your brand new guitar, is worth it. So this one is now going in my rack, and I'll be playing this a lot, letting it bed in I might tweak the pickup heights, I might tweak the action a little bit, because I like to faff around with it, but it's in good shape now. So this is staying. That means that this one, lovely though, is this one is going to be going on Reverb, and that'll be up listed in the next week or so. If you are interested in it, drop me a line and we'll see what we can do. If you keep watching the channel, you will see me faffing around with the wiring on this one and probably making a complete pig's ear of my first 335 rewire, but watch this space. And the Sheraton will continue to just sit there and look lovely and play beautifully going forward. So that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching. If you did, as always, enjoy it, please like and subscribe, and I hope we'll see you back here soon.